Entering into a major week in national politics. Georgia is one of 3 states with primary elections tomorrow. You've got both President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump that could secure their party's nominations.
Atlanta News First. Rebecca Schramm is live this morning in downtown Atlanta. Rebecca, both Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump were in the metro area over the weekend, and some pretty big crowds turned out to see both.
Yeah, you're right, Gurveer and Brooks. Good morning to you. Both Biden and Trump are, of course, their party's likely nominees. But if they want to clinch their party's nomination this week, they'll need their supporters to come out. Voters here in Atlanta and across this battleground state to show up at the polls tomorrow. Take a look. President Biden's rally Saturday was at Pullman Yards in Atlanta, and former President Donald Trump's rally was in Rome. The murder of Laken Riley on UGA's campus has become a talker in both parties. The president mentioned her death last week during his State of the Union address, calling her suspected killer an illegal, though he later said he should have used the term undocumented. In his speech here in Atlanta Saturday, Biden did not mention Laken Riley or her suspected killer, but Trump did.
And I say he was an illegal alien, he was an illegal immigrant, he was an illegal migrant, and he shouldn't have been in our country, and he never would have been under the Trump policy.
Instead of celebrating the contribution of immigrants to our country, to our economy and our communities, Donald Trump calls them vermin, poisoning the blood of America.
Remember, early voting ended on Friday, so if you want to vote in this primary, tomorrow is it. So go ahead and make plans. The polls will open at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, and they will close at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Live in downtown Atlanta, Rebecca Schramm, Atlanta News First.